Breaking news tonight, Helene gaining strength and now an extremely dangerous Category 4 storm.
From Tallahassee to Asheville, life-threatening river and flash flooding, a major flood event likely across the Appalachians.
They've had so much rain. The rain is tapering off, but that doesn't mean it's over because now the rivers are aggravated, they're rising, getting to record levels, and then spilling.
A really dire situation. We will see likely rescues in these areas, washed out roads, et cetera, with this kind of situation continuing to unfold through the morning hours.
The Nolichucky River in Unicoi County is, to some extent, it's a lifeblood of the county, right? I mean, historically, when people talk about Unicoi County, they talk about the Valley Beautiful, they talk about the gorgeous mountains, they talk about the beauty spot, they talk about the beautiful valley that Unicoi and Irwin are in, and of course, they talk about the river. Historically, this river has been a source of economic growth and development. Of course, we knew the hurricane was happening. We knew there was a lot of damage and rain and storms taking place just across the mountains in North Carolina. What's fascinating is it actually wasn't an ugly day in Unicoi County. It wasn't raining, it was actually beautiful. It was a little windy, a little bit chilly, but for the most part, it looked like a normal day.
That morning of September 27th, I had actually had a scheduled meeting with my Unicoi County EMA director. And the thought was just kind of go over, touch base with Jimmy, see what the river was looking like, get some pictures, send them back to Nashville. Kind of just a fun morning for the weather system that was coming through. So I was on my way there to meet him over at the courthouse where his office was. And I called him just to say, hey, I'm in Unicoi. Am I still meeting you at your office? And he's like, hey, listen, just for the heck of it, just divert and meet me over at the hospital. I just want to go by there and just make sure that they're aware of any plans that we might need to put in place in case we need to evacuate.
Went to the Unicoi County Memorial Hospital, met up with Michelle Madison with Tima. We had a meeting that morning. And she had called and said, hey, we're going to meet, but since it's flooding, I'm just not going over. I said, ain't no flooding, ain't nothing going on over in Unicoi County. Just a little wet, come on over, everything's still in the banks.
So I'm like, sure, I'll just go to the hospital. So I go to the hospital, park in the lot in front of the hospital, and I wait for him. And as I start waiting for him, my phone starts ringing, and it's the National Weather Service. And how they knew I was in Unicoi, I still don't know, but they're like, we know you're in Unicoi. Can you tell us what the weather looks like? And I'm like, it doesn't look too bad. I'm like, it's gray, it's raining a little bit, it's gusty, but it doesn't look too bad. And they're like, can you see the river? Well, you can see, if you look just right from the parking lot, you can see the Nolichucky behind the hospital. And I'm like, well, she's looking a little high, she's moving fast, I see some trees falling down. I said, but she's not looking gosh awful bad. And they're like, well, if anything changes, just call us and let us know. The EMA director, Jimmy Irwin, he got there, and I got into his car. I left mine in the front parking lot, got into his car. We drove around the back, got out, walked. We didn't walk to the river, but we were just kind of looking, we were talking, we were getting wet. And he kind of looks at me, he goes, what are you thinking? I'm like, I don't know yet. So we come back around, he parks in the front, and we go inside the lobby. And he's standing there with me, and we kind of looked at each other, and I said, Jimmy, I just don't have a good feeling. And he's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I said, my gut is just telling me that that we just need to pull the trigger and evacuate.
And at that point, my worst fear was, okay, we're going to evacuate. Nothing's going to happen. And I'm going to get my butt chewed out at the end of the day. Here we evacuate and cause all this hate for the day. And we kind of laughed and made a phone call to the maintenance guy at Hurricane Helene Memorial Hospital, which called the director. And within 20 minutes, we had EMS there, had fire there, Urban Police Department, the crew, the employees of the hospital. We'd done had a pre-plan. We'd done talked about it days prior if we ever had to do a evacuation. They were in the process of doing it. They were making it happen. As we were loading the patients up, you could see the bank in the back of the river there where the hospital was, still there. Nothing's come over the bank yet.
So we start pulling patients, we start loading patients up into the ambulances, and I'm not looking in front of the hospital. So my whole thing was I kept looking behind me because that's where the river was. And my car is still in the front of the hospital. So all of a sudden, I'm helping, kind of going inside the hospital. I'm grabbing blankets to put on some of the patients. And I hear some guy he starts freaking out. He's like, we gotta go now. And I'm like, what is going on? Because I'm still looking over my shoulder and I'm like, the river's not coming up. And I go around the corner, I come out of the hospital, go around the corner of the side of the hospital to find the EMA director to tell Jimmy I need his help back here. And all of a sudden, the whole front of the hospital, there's water everywhere. I'm like dumbfounded. I'm like, where did this water come from? Because it should have come from behind us.
But one of the things that got us, there was the egress and egress coming into the hospital was lower than the hospital. And the water had broke over probably 300 yards above us. And that became underwater. It became underwater enough to where it was not safe enough to get the ambulances out. They were able to get one or two of the bigger fire trucks out. Had to help some people get some things out that had started that way. So at that point we realized, hey, we're going to have rafts or something to get people out of the hospital.
I got on my phone, called Nashville, because the next conversations that we needed to start having was, how are we going to evacuate now? And so the decision was made. I talked to Jim Bean with Sullivan County. He's the head of the district swiftwater team. And I'm like, Jim, I'm in a bit of a pickle because I knew what was happening wasn't normal. So I'm like, I'm here at the Unicoi County Hospital. I'm like, we were trying to evacuate the patients with ambulance. I said, we're now stuck, we're now trapped. I said, is there any way that we can get the district swiftwater team over? And he's like, let me make some phone calls.
So the Tennessee District 1 Urban Search and Rescue Task Force is a state asset. It's a district team for 9 counties in Upper East Tennessee. It's made up of jurisdictions, Bristol, Kingsport, Johnson City, really any other agency that has trained qualified personnel that want to be on the team. So my day started just as a normal day. My little boy, we were milling around the house and we knew that we were supposed to get some storms. About 9:30, Assistant Chief Castle calls my phone. He says, hey, swiftwater deployment, you're going to Carter County, grab somebody and go now. Okay, no problem. So I dropped my little boy off with my dad and met firefighter Jonathan Rourke at Station 4. We got our equipment, a truck, and started toward Johnson City to the rendezvous point with the rest of the team that was coming from Kingsport and from Johnson City itself.
And whenever we got our debriefing information from Washington County, I'm originally from Mountain City, and that's where they told us we was going because they said it's flooded over there and there's a lot of people trapped and we need you to go now. And it was kind of like it hit home for a second because it's like I'm going back to my hometown and it's flooded over there.
Coming through Johnson City, Sullivan County EMA Director Jim Bean called my phone with an urgent message to divert from Carter County to the Unicoi Hospital. He relayed information that Michelle Matson from TEMA was there and they were trying to evac the hospital. And they were in pretty critical condition at that point.
And then they was like, we're redeploying you guys to Unicoi. to Irwin because the hospital's getting flooded, and we need you there like 30 minutes ago. It's getting bad. So coming up the road, coming up the interstate, and Austin's like, man, we don't see a whole lot of water. We don't see a whole lot of debris or anything like that. And then as soon as we rounded the last curve up there before you can actually see the hospital, and the water is already like over into the interstate, and we was like, oh, that's bad. That's real bad. So we just immediately just pulled off the side of the interstate, and we just started unloading the boats, getting ready, throwing gear on, unloading boats, and wanting to get to the hospital as quick as we could, because we knew that it was going to be, the water was going to be coming, and it was going to be coming fast.
There's a gas station just east of the hospital that provided a little bit of a launch point for our boats. There's a ditch in front of it that we were able to back our boat trailers into and launch our boats. At that point, really any time that we get requested, we are Plan B. They're unable to get out on their own, and they need some help. So we are Plan B.
So me and my captain, Austin, and then we had a medic from Washington County that was actually driving the boat 10 miles, and we just tried to get across as fast as we could. And we're dodging like pieces of houses and huge piles of debris just to get to the hospital. And then when we got over to the hospital, they were already wheeling patients out on hospital beds in wheelchairs, and they're like, just the hospital's flooded and the water's rising.
So then I think at some point, Austin and I made contact with each other, because my next concern was the water's rising. I mean, and it's rising fast. I would say in probably 15 minutes, it went from ankles to knees, really fast. It was such a sense of relief to see these guys come across, because they're here, they're gonna come in, they're gonna do what they've trained to do. I know their faces, and I'm like, this is what, I finally get to see what you guys get to do. I finally get a boat ride. This is gonna be fun. So they get across, we start moving the more critical patients that were still in the ambulances or on stretchers to the boats. Well, we get them on the boats, the most critical patients, and they start to turn to go. And then all of a sudden, they're like, we can't go. And I'm like, what do you mean we can't go? And they're like, pick your head up. And at that moment, I picked my, because I'm looking down at the boat, and I pick my head up, and houses are floating down. Trees, huge trees are floating down.
The initial plan was to load our critical ER patients in boats, motor them back across, and start shuttling ambulatory staff and others. But when the river wall broke, we knew that we were going to have to shelter in place and start devising a Plan C.
And it was once we seen like big, huge stumps and trees, and then every so many minutes, like a house would come by, or a building or a garage. It would just come floating by, and we automatically knew, like right then, like we're not going to be able to go back. And then we put more and more boats, and we just kind of pushed the boats in a little bitty corner of the hospital. Less current. There was a whole lot less debris, so we was just like, well, we'll put them on here on the boats and push them up in this corner until we kind of get a game plan together.
And then at that point, reality really hit, because now we can't get out from ambulances, we can't get out from boats. Our only option now is helicopters. Thank goodness that the Swiftwater guys were there. Thank goodness that we had a fire truck there, because at that point the decision was made to start evacuating everybody to the roof. So they took just a normal ladder off the fire truck, threw it on the side of the hospital, and the Swiftwater guys, the law enforcement guys, the fire department guys were helping the nurses, helping all the patients get back on the roof.
We were very fortunate to have random resources on scene, such as a fire truck. The Irwin SWAT team was there to lend a hand. So we were able to get a ladder off the fire truck and get everybody that was ambulatory and able to the roof to a safer spot.
So we got everyone on the roof. Our patients in the hospital still stayed in the rafts. Our swiftwater technicians from Johnson City, from Kingsport, Bristol, was taking care of them, helping them. And I've said this many times, it was God's send. On a normal day, I wouldn't have had those 4 or 6 people from another agency that were swiftwater trained, that were ropes trained, because if they had not been there, there'd only been 2 of us there that would have known how to get the ropes.
The other strike team leaders and myself conversed, and the decision was made to send some swimmers through the ER, collecting medical supplies, blankets, anything of use.
And we was wading through the ER, just trying to find any kind of blankets, sheets, anything that we knew that would help better the situation for our patients. And we put them in plastic bags and waded it back out there to them, just so they would have a little bit of something until we could get them out of the situation they was in. And
we knew that there was a storm above us and on its way from North Carolina that would prevent aircraft from flying. And the decision was made to just get as comfortable as we can to reassure everybody that was around us and prepare for the long haul. The group of people that we had, staff, Dr. Oceanbine, other emergency responders, we were all pretty like-minded in the fact that our patients were the first priority.
So while all this is going on, I'm on the phone with my parents, and I'm like, Mom and Dad, I'm like, I love y'all. This is not good. If y'all see it on the news, this is what's happening. I'm like, because I was thinking that maybe I wasn't coming back from it, but I wasn't like sure yet. So I kind of said my goodbyes to my mom and dad, came back around the corner, got up on the roof, and started FaceTiming Nashville, because I was sending pictures to Nashville, I was talking to Nashville, but they weren't seeing it in real time. So I FaceTimed them to show them how dire the situation was. Half the swiftwater guys stayed with the boats with those critical, so as the water went up, they kind of went up with the patients to make sure that the patients had care. At that time also, I would like to say I was totally stoic and like, oh, I've got this. But there's a couple times I broke down. I called my girls, FaceTimed my 3 daughters, and I'm like, Mom's, because I'm like, I'm not coming off this roof.
Most people called their family, told their families goodbye. Multiple times. I talked to my wife several times. Kept telling her, hey, I'll be home, everything's good. She's upset. Called my son, talked to him. But back in my mind, I was like, hey, we gotta get off this roof. We gotta get off this roof.
You could definitely tell the worry in the patient's eyes. And one of the ladies that I had in my boat that I was attending to, I was like, sweetie, I said, I know this is rough, and I said, I know you didn't anticipate being on a boat in the middle of a flooded hospital, but I said, if you could just take some time, just think if you're on a cruise in some really dirty water, and we are going to get you out of this real shortly. Just bear with us.
While we were up there, we had prayer. Everyone got in a circle and we had prayer. Some of them sung some songs, what it took to relieve their nerves and their pressures, to keep everybody calm. And everyone done life or death situation, they're calling their families, but everybody stayed positive and everybody stayed calm.
When I knew that my state vehicle was going to go underwater, I waded out to it and I grabbed my portable radio. Why, I don't know, but I grabbed it, which was a good thing because that gave me communications with the Blackhawks. I was talking to our 24-hour watch point in Nashville because they were in communication with the Virginia State Patrol guys. So I had known that the Virginia State Patrol guys were on their way. They had thought that the Blackhawks were a little further out than what they turned out to be. So I was looking, everybody kept coming up to me, when are the helicopters getting here? I'm like, as soon as they can. I'm like, as soon as they get a window that they can fly, I said, they're gonna come.
And that's what was holding them off, was the storm that's just coming. So a couple helicopters had called and said, hey, what's your frequency, we can talk to you. And I had directed them to my communications guy, and I was like, all right, we got help coming. So the first 2 helicopters come in was Virginia State Police, and when those helicopters come, I was like, all right, we got a chance.
When you hear that sound of those rotor blades in the distance, that was the first time that I was like, we're gonna get off this roof.
Virginia State Police was the first helicopter to us. We were very, very glad to see them. I actually know that flight crew personally, and there's a casual exchange of, boy, I'm glad to see you. Once the aircraft started showing up, that's when we knew that the work was beginning. We had a whole lot of people to get out of there, and we had to do it real quick.
I remember my captain looking down to me, and he goes, we've got some Blackhawks coming. And then what they're going to do is they're going to land on the roof. The people that is ambulatory, they're going to start taking them out, and then we're going to do these things, what they call pickoffs. And they send Army personnel down, and you're going to hook them up to a hoist system, and then they're going to hoist them up in the air, and we'll do that one at a time until we get everybody gone.
And thinking back on it, it was never discussed, but we knew that we were going to be the last helicopter off that roof. That's what we do. So as helicopters started coming in, we were able to get with our boat medics, get them to triage their patients by acuity so that we could get the most afflicted out of there first. The ambulatory staffers, doctors, nurses, things like that, they came kind of midways. Other emergency responders picked up the tail end, and the Swiftwater team was the very last helicopter off the roof.
After everybody was gone, we got up on top of the roof, and then a Blackhawk just come landed on the roof and picked us up and took us. And when we was lifting up and we was headed back towards the hospital, we just kind of looked out the window and we're like, we was in the middle of all that water. We was at the hospital, and the river, it just seemed like it just swallowed the hospital whole.
And when I came up in the helicopter and looked at the industrial park, I was like, oh my God, that has flooded too. And I saw the bridge was washed out. We didn't know that. So reality set in even worse. And if someone says that at that time that their mind's in the right set, it's not. My mind was not in the right set because we just made a life-to-death situation and got out of it.
When we got off the hospital roof, somebody had brought our truck to us. It was sitting in the parking lot of the high school. When we set foot on the ground, one of the other strike team leaders said, hey, we got to load back up and go again. And that's what we did. I'll say that the Bristol, Tennessee Fire Department alone supported search, rescue, and recovery operations for 13 days after our disaster.
They're our district team, and they train all the time to get deployed on Swiftwater missions. For them to be in a position where they could divert and come to that hospital totally saved lives that day.
Especially right here close to where we're at now, near the hospital and some of the outdoor recreation spaces in my own home. There are people's yards that I've been in that I grew up playing in. There's a house just up the road here right on the river. Me and some friends had our high school graduation party in the backyard. The yard's no longer there. It's water and rock, river rock. So there are spaces that I have physically stood that I grew up that were a part of my experience in Unicoi County that exist no more. And across the river, you've got spaces where I'm used to seeing water that I now see land. But it's hard standing somewhere that you've seen your entire life that's always looked the same, and in a matter of hours, it's a completely different place.
Unfortunately, we lost 6 lives during the flood, and it took us several weeks to find all of them. But we were determined not to quit till we found the last one. And I'm proud to say we did find all of ours that got hurt in Unicoi County and died. We also found some out in North Carolina that had washed out from North Carolina. So trying to bring as much closure to the families as possible. Without the resource that we had from the regional Swiftwater team and those men and women and their expertise and their training, there's a possibility that we'd had 4 more victims at the hospital.
So I've been in a lot of meetings related to recovery and disaster relief, and the phrase that I've heard so many times is, you know, the day after the disaster this, the day after the disaster that. I would challenge that. The day of the disaster, I saw, myself included, our neighbors, our friends, our families, businesses, they were out helping to board up people's garages. They were in some of the outdoor recreation companies helping them move their products and move their supplies to higher ground. That was happening as the waters were still rising. While there was still a lot of uncertainty, while not clear really where it was safe, where you can go, what you can do. But everybody just felt the need to, you know, I've got two hands, I've got time, this is my community, where's my place? And you found your place. All of that was happening on the day of the flood. The next day was just a continuation of that. It's funny that in a moment of disaster, that volunteer spirit, that desire and wish to be helpful almost becomes another disaster in and of itself, right? There's so much outpouring of love and such an outpouring of resources, whether they be dollars, whether they be food, whether they be cases of water, that becomes overwhelming, right? It was almost too much. There was too many people and too much stuff, and everybody was being overwhelmed.
We've got such an amazing group of people that I work with here at the Speedway, and immediately when the storm started happening, we started hearing the reports on that, I guess, Friday afternoon about what was going on in the hospital in Irwin and other flooding in the area, but I don't think any of us realized the devastation at that point. But even in that, we had team members that were coming to me, texting me, asking, what are we gonna do? How can we go serve? And from a Speedway standpoint, you know, we had some individuals that went immediately just to help out, but an orchestrated, organized response from the Speedway, I really wanted to make sure we were gonna be most effective, because I knew a lot of people were running to help, which is a wonderful thing. But sometimes, you know, you can get too many people in one spot, and we've got some really talented folks. I want to make sure their talents were going to be used in the most effective way. So I reached out to the governor's office and said, hey, can you connect me with someone at TEMA or somewhere else? Where can I find out how we can be most effective and most helpful? And little did we know that at the same time, that Saturday, Sunday, that next weekend, a gentleman who became a dear friend and is now a dear friend now, Brandon Smith from Putnam County, had been deployed through TEMA to Unicoi to help just facilitate and organize the disaster response. I also didn't know, but Patrick Sheehan, the director of TEMA, had in his mind, hey, we really need a centralized location in that area. I wonder if Bristol Motor Speedway is available. So the stars aligned, if you will. I met with Brandon that Monday he came over, I believe it was, and he said, just tell me what you've got. So I took him to the South building, showed him some other things, but I'll never forget when he immediately walked in. I had talked to him on the phone previously and mentioned some of those things, and when he walked in, he said, you may not realize this, but I think you're an answer to prayer. And I said, well, we like that. We like being an answer to prayer. And I really think that's what we ended up being, because it worked.
And I think in that moment is where the Northeast Tennessee kind of regional mentality, I think, really shone through. I know in the past, we've always tried to figure out, how do you best play with one another? How does this county and this community talk to that county? How do we work together? And I think what we saw through the disaster and through Bristol Motor Speedway was there is a place for that, and not just a place, but a need for that, right? In that moment, this large space that maybe didn't have a ton of people, but it for sure has space. It's got room. It's got lots and lots and lots of room. What role can they play? What role can it play? And they just offered it up, and they said, here's what we can do. Let's take that pressure off of you.
You chuckle now thinking about it, but the warehouse is 80,000 square feet. When I met with Brandon and the folks from TEMA, they really thought the first bay was all we were going to need for the whole thing. And I was like, great, we'll clear it out. We're going to go ahead and clear the second bay just in case. And we filled the first bay after the first day, the second bay. And then little did we know we were heading to fill the entire Waltrip grandstand and backstretch grandstands with things. But You know, that first day, there's a gentleman walks in with a husband and wife, and they said, we're here to help. And, you know, it was Amanda and Brian Delp, who have now become dear friends. But from the get-go, they were just here. Amanda kind of helped run the front with the call center and other things and helped set that up. And then Brian ran the warehouse. A friend of his showed up right after them named Stan Huff, who again has become a dear friend now. And Stan said, I used to work in some warehouses, ran warehouses. I can help you set this warehouse up. And Stan really took that part over. Time after time, God provided exactly what we needed. None of us knew exactly what it was going to look like, but we tried to just do the next right thing. How can we help out, and let's do the next right thing. I'm thankful we were able to be there, and I know it had an impact. I think we were just a part of a bigger thing, a bigger part of this community and this region, and the way we all responded together.
I think that volunteerism is deeply rooted in Upper East Tennessee. I think that family is much, much larger than we give it credit for here. And I think that this, as bad as it was an opportunity for that to really show itself. I think that during normal times, we still have that here. All we have to do is ask for it.
The coming together of so many different agencies was amazing. Communities coming together to set up distribution centers. Agencies across the whole state making phone calls saying, hey, we've got people that we can send to you to backfill, to help. We truly live in the volunteer state. For me, it has changed me. That experience on the roof has given me a totally different perspective on life.
That day, the next day, and every day after, so much outpour of help came from our neighbors. People are still giving and helping, and people rebuild their houses, rebuild their lives. That day, a lot of people's lives have changed. And still yet, 6 months later, I'll talk to someone that I haven't talked to, and they tell me their story. Everyone who was in our area that day has their story, the things that happened to them that no one else knows until they share it. It's kind of like 9/11. Wherever they were at that day when that flood hits, that's something that's going to stay with them the rest of their lives.
In that moment where you are sitting on the couch and maybe you're safe and you've got electricity and you've got internet and you're watching the news and you see something happening somewhere in the world, and the things that you see happening, the numbers, the statistics, behind every one of those is a name and a story and a livelihood and a family. And I don't think I quite appreciated that until after this experience.
Understand that we're trained to deal with and to adapt to the most uncommon things that you can imagine. So training absolutely prevailed. Adrenaline had a big part in that. But 3 to 4 days after, when I was home alone, reminiscing on things, I had talked to Michelle every day since that event. It hit that we experienced a once-in-a-lifetime event that I hope nobody ever has to do again.
We use the term of we're going to get wet. We're going to get wet today, and we know we're getting in water. If we know we're getting in water, we're going to help somebody, and that's what we like to do. So when it really set in, it was probably like 2 days later, and then people that you don't work with every day, they would send you like pictures and be like, man, did you see the stuff that those guys got into over there at the hospital? And I'm like, yeah, that's crazy. Like, I mean, why would anybody want to do that? And then, like, so, you know, a whole lot of people we never really even told right off the bat that, yeah, we went over to the hospital and this is what we done, this is why we done. Because it takes a few days for that to set in, and to know that, you know, what you did and why you did it. And then whenever you go back home and, you know, you don't hear the sirens no more, you don't hear the water rush, and you don't hear the helicopters buzzing over top of you and the rotor wash, and you're like, a couple days later, you're like, wow, that was really awesome. We got to do some really cool things, and we got to save a lot of lives that day, and everybody went home. And for us, that's a good day.